On today's show, the Rockets offense completely misfires in the fourth. They give up a 13-point lead and lose to the Blazers. Kevin Durant frustrated. Ime Udoka pissed. Tari Eason hurt. Jabari Smith Jr. shot nowhere to be found. We're going to break it all down for you right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. The Houston Rockets collapse in the fourth quarter against the team they're supposed to beat. What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the #1 sports podcast network. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. On today's show, Rockets lose again to the Blazers, 111-105, after another unbelievable fourth quarter collapse. This team has a penchant for these fourth quarter collapses. They're getting really good at them, unfortunately. God, remember when I did like the preview for this upcoming week and like playing without Sengun and like on paper, I was like, yeah, like on paper, they should be able to like handle the Blazers and the Kings, and like these should all be wins on paper, even without Alpi. God, I'd like to go back to that point in time when I was so blindly optimistic. We're going to be talking about the Rockets' lead that they squandered, the offense just going completely off the rails in the fourth quarter, Kevin Durant's frustrations, Ime's frustrations, and Ime's own role in this loss. Jabari Smith Jr.'s inability to hit the broadside of a barn with his jumper in this one. Tari Eason gets hurt. So much to unpack from this one. And of course, want to thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym, at the bottom of a bottle after another collapse in the fourth quarter. Look, there are two reasons the Rockets lost this game. Two. That's the short and the skinny of it. One of them is Jabari Smith Jr. And one of them is Ime Udoka. It's that simple. All right, Kevin Durant did his job. And that's why KD was pissed on the bench, throwing his Gatorade bottle around, upset, visibly upset, and understandably so. Ime Thompson, solid overall performance, 24 points, 9 of 17 shooting. Reed Shepherd, 20 points off the Rockets bench, gave him a huge scoring spark off the bench, which they desperately needed. Those three guys did their job, right? Jabari Smith Jr., 13 points on 6 of 21 shooting. He was 0 of 10 from downtown. He was 0 for 8 in the fourth quarter. He took one more shot attempt than KD in the fourth quarter and had 0 points to show for it by the end of the frame. The Rockets squandered that 13-point lead. They were leading 90-77 at the top of the fourth. And they let the Blazers go on an 11-0 run during that gap. And in that gap, right, like there was, I mean, it was 2.5 minutes at the top of the fourth quarter, and they just gave up. They rolled over. And this part isn't exclusively a Jabari Smith Jr. issue, because defensively they needed to be a little bit better, right? They gave up too many opportunities to the Blazers. They let them wrestle all the momentum of this game back, all of that, right? But offensively, like going through the logbook of like what happened, right? Like you can peruse, and there's like multiple Jabari Smith Jr. missed 3-pointers in that stretch at the top of the fourth quarter. The offense just could not find any rhythm, and some of the shots were okay, wide open shots. Others were more being forced, so-so shots you don't really want your team taking. And they turned the ball over. Like, that's the reality of it, is they just couldn't get anything going offensively in that stretch, and they gave up that 11-0 run, and the Blazers got right back into it. Minor, small, very small silver lining here is Jabari Smith Jr. is acutely aware of his own struggles in these past 2 games. Let's hear what he had to say after this one.
Jabari, when you kind of take inventory of the last 2 games just as a team, what do you think you guys can clean up and do better to stack some wins?
Jabari Smith making a jump shot. When one of your best shooters is getting wide open threes, wide open looks, you got to knock them down. You know what I'm saying? It messes up the floor of the offense, messes up the floor of the team. If guys can just load up and pack the paint, I'm supposed to be one of the best shooters. So I think it's just taking them to the chin. I don't think we should overthink it. We're generating good looks. I'm shooting great shots. But at the end of the day, I got to make shots. We got to make shots. But mainly me, you know what I'm saying? I'm shooting the bulk of the threes. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I got to make shots at the end of the day. If I make shots, we win both games. So, you know, got to make shots at the end of the day.
So at least that's somewhat encouraging hearing from Jabari, knowing that he knows that he needs to be better, because that's the reality of it. Is Jabari Smith Jr. is a swing factor for this Rockets team, especially in the absence of Alperen Şengün, right? With Alperen Şengün, you can maybe afford for Jabari to have a no-show performance or a performance where he's less than efficient, right? But his year 4 numbers are now worse than his year 2 numbers. He is actively regressing, and that flat out can't happen. Like it just can't. Jabari Smith Jr. had zero reason to be in the game to close that one out, outside of maybe the fact that because Tari got hurt, Ime had to rely on Jabari in those closing minutes, although we'll talk more about that in a second when we get to the Ime Udoka side of things here. But the reality is, for this Rockets team to function, Jabari Smith Jr. has to be a star in his role, right? He has to be a 3-and-D role player that can knock down shots at a reliable clip, at ideally an above average rate, to keep defenses honest. Otherwise, exactly what he said, right? Like he misses shots and the defense, it gets to just collapse, pack the paint, muck everything up, make life difficult for Kevin Durant, make life difficult for Alperen Şengün. And we get these absolutely egregious offensive performances where, you know, overall, like some of the shots that he took were good, and then others were just questionable, poor, bad decisions, right? But not being able to get anything going offensively. And at some point, when you're in that kind of a shooting rut, you got to manufacture points some other way, right? You can't just keep heaving from 3 and praying that one goes in. If you're Kevin Durant, fine, you can get away with it, right? KD had his game the other night where he was struggling against the Suns and he cans only his second 3-pointer late in the game to give him the win, right? Like when you've earned the right to do that, you can do that. But when you're year 4 Jabari Smith Jr., after maybe your 5th or 6th or 7th miss from 3, maybe at that point you just put your head down and drive to the rim, right? Try and draw contact, get to your mid-range, do something a little bit different rather than the same thing over and over and over, because that's the definition of insanity, right? Trying the same thing over and over, expecting different results. And so the reality is, if Jabari Smith Jr. hits even like a couple threes in this game, right? If he hits a couple of those 7 threes that he took in the 4th quarter, we're probably talking about a Rockets win instead of their 2nd straight loss to a below 500 Blazers team. That's not great. It's not a great look for this team. And it's understandable why, you know, guys feel so somber about it. And, you know, his point about not overreacting, like I guess I get it to a degree, but at the same time, you know, you can't just chalk it up to saying, oh, well, shots didn't go in, right? You know, maybe they'll fall next time. Is something has to like systematically be different next time if a player is struggling that much. And Jabari just can't. He's too important to this team in his role. He cannot have games like this where he is just basically a non-factor offensively, or where he's struggling that much. He took more shot attempts total in this game than Kevin Durant did. Only by 1, but if you're taking that volume of shots, you better be converting on them, right? Or they need to go to somebody else. That's just it, is it can't happen that way. And Ime Udoka allowed it and enabled it, and he was the 2nd biggest factor in this Rockets loss against the Blazers. I want to talk about his role in this game, where we need to see Udoka improve, in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action unfolds. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, different boosts, bonuses, and surprises. So before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building, the energy, the crowd, that first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments, not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are actually going to cost. That's where Game Time comes in. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Game Time app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Prices include fees up front, so the total is clear from the start. Full transparency. Whether it's an NBA game or another live event, everything is right there in one place. So take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today and get in on the action. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Remember, the best way to help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Let's go ahead and hear from Ime Udoka after this loss, because I have a lot to say about what Ime had to say after this one.
I guess simply put, what went wrong in the fourth quarter? It seemed like you guys were in command heading in.
Take a 37-year-old out of the game for 2 minutes, and you lose a 13-point lead, 11-0 run. That's what went wrong. Don't play with any aggression, confidence, mentally weak, and have a 15-point quarter, 1 for 17 from 3. I think a bunch of wide open looks. Making shots help, but you have to guard on one end. You have to play with some aggression on one end, drive it physically, take care of the ball and not turn it over. So all the above. But the fact that we have to rely on a 37-year-old for 40-plus minutes is a problem.
And you mentioned that 1 for 17 in that fourth quarter on threes. What did you kind of just see from them looks? Do you feel like, fortunately, do you feel like they were good looks? I guess, how did you feel?
Majority wide open. The others that are heavily contested or got blocked, you got a guy closing out on you full speed. You got to be able to pump fake it and make a play for somebody else. Basic basketball.
We didn't get a good look on what happened to Tari. Do you have any insight as to what happened?
Rolled his ankle. That's all I heard. I didn't see it.
Yeah, okay.
And you mentioned that stretch at the start of the fourth when KD was on the bench when they kind of went on that run. What did you see with those guys out there where the lead just kind of went away quickly?
It happened on both ends. We got some open looks before I called the timeout quickly, and then didn't guard it, all fouled. So all the above, we didn't defend at all. They just drove us, got offensive rebounds, and then the looks we got, either turned it over, played in the crowd, or just missed wide open shots.
You guys shut down Avia pretty good in the first half. Where did that go wrong in the fourth quarter?
Started attacking off of misses, getting downhill, got some fouls there, and then just isolation. They went away from the pick and roll, and he isolated and attacked some guys he shouldn't be able to attack that easily.
And obviously it's not just him, but, rough night for Jabari tonight, couldn't get shots to go in that fourth. What did you kind of just see from him tonight overall?
Not being as aggressive or confident as you should. You can see it on his face, and, if you're not making shots, you got to insert yourself in other ways. Get out in transition, crash the glass, defend, and create turnovers, put defense to offense. And so you can't always rely on jump shots, and I think our team in general is going through a rough stretch, but him specifically, you got to play through it and not show it on your face.
So Ime Udoka's comments after this Rockets loss, and look, first things first. The reason I am giving Jabari and Ime most of the blame for this loss, right, is because Jabari had zero business being in the game with how poorly he had played up to that point. It's understandable, right? You have key guys in your rotation. You've got guys who you rely on, and maybe some of it had to do with Tari's injury, which, yay, Tari Eason hurt, so he's gone again for, we don't know the timetable, but after just getting him back, now Tari's out again due to injury. At some point, we might have to have the conversation about Tari Eason being injury prone, which is another very disappointing thing to have to, wrestle with this season. But we've seen Ime bench players for less in the past. And it doesn't make sense to me why Jabari Smith Jr. was still in the game at that point. Again, maybe some of it had to do with Tari being hurt, and Ime felt that he had to stick with Jabari because of the size, the defense, the rebounding, what have you. But I'd argue that with how detrimental Jabari was being offensively without being able to hit anything, that you could have inserted Jayshawn Tate and his energy and his screening ability and his passing and hell, even Jayshawn Tate might have been good for a corner three. If he had taken 7 of them like Jabari did, he might have hit 1 or 2 of them. But that's where it starts, right? Is Jabari was out there and struggling and had been woeful the entire game. But it was Ime's decision to leave him in the game, to keep him in, where he continued, because he took 3 shots during that stretch where the Blazers mounted their comeback, went on the 11-0 run, right? Then Ime had to break glass in case of emergency, reinsert Kevin Durant back into the game, all that, right? After barely getting any rest. He left Jabari in the game. Jabari, over the course of the rest of the quarter, still took 5 more shots, took 4 more threes, I believe. But like that was the mistake, right? Is Jabari had zero business being out there. Could have gone with any number of other guys on the bench. Should have run with Josh Okogie probably. Could have run, if you really felt the need to, you could have run some double big to match up with the Blazers double big with Yang Hansen and Time Lord out there. Like, you could have done any number of things to alleviate yourselves from the issues of a guy that was clearly in his head and struggling a great deal to convert offensively and making life harder for his teammates as a direct result, right? And so that's where it starts with Ime, right? Is Jabari was on the floor and was struggling and was pretty bad all game. And then Ime's decision to leave him in guaranteed the Rockets this loss. It did. But beyond that, it's frustrating because it sounds like a broken record, right? Hearing Ime talk about lack of aggression, confidence, mentally weak, like soft, like all these different buzzwords, right? It always boils down to the same kind of like coach speak that we hear from Ime after these really frustrating losses. And at some point, right, like what can be done differently, I guess, to have a different approach? Because we're watching the same thing play out every single game now, where Kevin Durant hits the bench and then the Rockets are unable to manufacture any kind of decent offense. They just flat out either can't hit shots, or if they do generate, like maybe they do generate some good shots and they just miss them, or they just flat out can't even generate good shots. And that's the bigger concern, is the fact that they cannot generate consistently high quality offense without Kevin Durant. Hell, they can barely generate high quality offense with Kevin Durant on the floor. Sometimes a lot of their offense boils down to KD just hitting a ridiculous isolation contested shot, and it's KD, so he can do it. But I said at the very beginning of this season that this year in particular, with Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün, I know Alpy's hurt, right? So that doesn't necessarily apply to this game in particular, but zooming out from like a 10,000 foot perspective, the fact that the Rockets offense has looked this bad at times this season, despite having 2 unbelievable offensive weapons in Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün, is an indictment on the coaching staff, right? Like, it should look a lot better. It shouldn't look as bad as it does at the times that it does, right? Like, the offense looks a mess when Kevin Durant isn't out there on the floor. And some of that has to do with, no Fred VanVleet and Amin and Reed are still learning their roles and growing and all that. And I get that, but it's also just the overall offensive identity of the team, right? It feels like they don't have, I guess, set plays where you can plug and play like the next man up and just run the exact same set, right? Maybe they have specific plays designed. They have specific sets and plays designed for Kevin Durant and for Alperen Şengün, but it's not like you plug in the net. Like you're not going to run a wedge roll action and get Steven Adams posted up down low and play through him the same way you play through Alperen Şengün. You're not going to run, a pin down and get somebody catching at the elbow the way you do Kevin Durant so that he can isolate, right? Like you're not going to run those same actions, but it doesn't feel like the Rockets have offensive plays or sets that they have designed up that anybody can slot into, right? Like it doesn't feel like they have anything that they can go to in those non-Kevin Durant minutes that feels sustainable or reliable or consistent. And that's a problem. And some of that has to do with the personnel, right? Some of that has to do with it's a very young team and they're all still very inconsistent at times, right? The two offensive guys that they need to rely on, right? Guys like Amin Thompson and Reed Shepherd do need to be better in those non-KD minutes. And they were better in this game. But then their release valve, right? Their outlet for a lot of the possessions that they started or initiated or created an opportunity, whatever, the ball wound up in the hands of Jabari Smith Jr. and he just could not deliver. But this loss is squarely on Jabari Smith Jr. and his lack of production and Ime Udoka and his inflexibility or his willingness, the fact that he enabled Jabari to continue struggling despite seeing what he saw up to that point in the game, 38 minutes and some change, 40 minutes and some change up to that point, right? That should have been enough evidence to show, hey, maybe I shouldn't close the game with this guy. And then even beyond that is the even greater concern of just what does this Rockets offensive identity look like, right? What is this team offensively beyond just give the ball to Kevin Durant and Alperen Şengün and pray that they can pull a rabbit out of a hat offensively, because they do it a lot because they're both really good at it. But the Rockets need some offensive structure and hierarchy and some go-to stuff beyond just that. And even just that has looked a little questionable at times with the fact that they burn, sometimes 10, 15 seconds off a possession, just trying to get the ball to Kevin Durant for him to hit a miracle of a shot anyways. Like they can't even effectively get the ball to their stars sometimes. And that in and of itself is a major concern. So this game was painfully disappointing for a lot of reasons. They shouldn't have lost. They continue to have this remarkable ability to collapse in impressive fashion in the fourth quarter. They have a chance to get right Sunday night against the Kings. Alperen Şengün is questionable for that game, so we'll see if he actually plays. But the fact that it feels like the Rockets are maybe potentially rushing Alperen Şengün back from his injury because they just can't function without him is embarrassing in and of itself, right? They should be able to afford to give him time to heal and make sure he's 100% before bringing him back into the fold. But things just look really rough without him, right? So, I don't know what else you got to do, but Jabari's got to be better. Ime Udoka's got to be better. The team has to be better. You're getting what you get out of Kevin Durant. He's still playing at a superstar level. Other guys need to step up and be better. If I was Kevin Durant, I'd be frustrated too. And that's just the reality of where this team is at right now after a pair of frustrating losses to a surprisingly talented Blazers team. This Blazers team gets after it. They're good. They did a decent job on Denny for most of the game, and then Denny found a way to make his mark in the fourth quarter, right? So hat tip to the Blazers. They earned these wins against the Rockets. They flat out did. The Rockets need to try and shake it off, get back into action Sunday night against the Kings, and hopefully get back to playing a good brand of Rockets basketball, not whatever this mess was these past two games against the Blazers. Offensively, they need to get out of this shooting slump in a bad way because the shooting cannot... The defense is about to take a hit with no Tari Eason, so you need to be able to rely on your offense at least a little bit to make up the difference there. But I want your thoughts from this Rockets-Blazers game. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.